What is Opus Dei, and why is it different from just being a regular Catholic?
While you're working your work, you're turning it into prayer by the love you put into it.
Dan Brown wrote a book, generally speaking, Opus Dei, making it out to be secretive and shady, and they do all these self-punishments.
During those years, I remember it being on flights, people next to me reading the book. So I say, how do you like the book? Oh, it's great. And I would ask, have you ever met anybody in Opus Dei? No. Hi, and I would introduce myself, and then led to really wonderful conversations, and
Father Luke Mata, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Lila. Great to be here.
It's an honor to have you here. You're very busy going up and down California, preaching the good news, and we have many, many mutual friends. You have helped me and heard my confession many times, so thank you for all of your labors of love for souls and for our Lord.
You're very, very welcome. You're very gracious. Thank you, Lila.
So my hope bringing you here, and thank you for coming, is to talk about prayer and also what it means to be a priest of the work. I think there's some myths to shatter maybe about Opus Dei that I thought, who better than Father Luke Mata? So thank you. Thanks for being willing to
ask me anything you want.
Ask Father Luke Mata anything. Amazing. So let's start with your priesthood. When did you become a priest? What made you decide to become a priest?
Well, I became a priest about 20 years ago. And why? Because I felt that God was calling me to it. I came to the priesthood through the work, as you call it, Opus Dei. Sometimes it's referred to as the work. Opus Dei means work of God. And so I was a member of Opus Dei. I made a commitment to Opus Dei for life when I was in college. But I always wanted to be a doctor, and that's what I started studying. And then little by little, God was showing me He had different plans for me. I never thought really of the priesthood until much later, but then it became more and more clear. And so, I was ordained finally. I was, 38, 39 when I was ordained. So I was kind of starting to become an old man.
Where are you from originally?
I'm from Madrid. My parents moved there. My dad actually is from Tangiers. He was born in Northern Africa. So now when people ask me, I tell them I'm an African American because my dad was from Africa. My mom was from the northern part of Spain, but eventually both of them ended up in Madrid, and they got married, and that's why I was born there.
Growing up, were you feeling led to the priesthood growing up in Madrid, or was that something that came to you later when you were in college? And you said you were
it came later, not even during college per se. I think it was even afterwards. I was always open to whatever God wanted, and certainly I would ask Him often, hey, whatever you want of me, show it to me. And I learned that from my parents, and then certainly in my being part and receiving formation from Opus Dei, that was always encouraged. And along the way I was asked, hey, is this something that you think God will be calling you to? And so I took it to prayer, and it wasn't one big moment, it was like a little tiny gentle voice that became kind of louder and louder and louder. And finally I thought, hey, maybe this is it. So I mentioned this in my spiritual direction, and then I told the prelate of Opus Dei, hey, I think God is maybe calling me to this. So he said, okay, come over to Rome. And so I went over to our seminary. Opus Dei has just one international seminary in Rome, and so that's where I went.
What was it about your childhood? Can you share more about it that put you on this path where it sounds like you were always trying to serve our Lord and be faithful, and then you were open to the priesthood? You would receive that call more clearly later, maybe in college and in your 20s. But what was it? What was your upbringing like that opened your heart so much to God and His grace?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have to say, I just had, and I'm so lucky, really wonderful parents. My dad actually died almost a year ago. It was just a few days ago was his first anniversary. And actually, I can share something because it was so beautiful. I wasn't there when he died. I was there a little bit before. And we had a kind of a family reunion. We're 9 kids. I'm the second oldest. And so I spent a few times, and by then we had moved my dad to the main living room. He had a hospital bed and all the hospice stuff there. And the night before I was coming back to the U.S., we had dinner all around my dad's bed. And my dad would always get very emotional when it were the departures, the goodbyes, and related to his upbringing. But and we were all there, and he was getting kind of a little bit emotional. He was very aware, and then one of my sisters said, "Hey, Dad, are you afraid?" He knew he was going to die soon. "Are you afraid of dying?" And he said, "No." He was very upbeat and cheerful, big smile. He said, "No, no." And my sister said, "Really?" He said, "No, I really want to see God. And I want to see him face to face." And so he said, "I'm looking forward to say, listen, I don't want to die. I mean, whenever he wants. I mean, I know it's coming, but I want to see him so badly that I'm looking forward to it." I mean, that was quite we were all. And then one of my other sisters, there's 3 girls and 6 boys. The sisters are amazing. They really are something. And then another one said, "Well, Dad, we prepare a list of all the things that we want you to do when you get to heaven." And he started laughing. And it was just a beautiful laughter at that moment. And he kind of laughing, he said, "I thought it was called eternal rest, and you're giving me more work." I said, "Yes, Dad." And they had, the 3 of them had gotten together, and actually they had a list. And it was
things they wanted him to pray for them.
And do when he was in heaven. Yeah, it was. And then he then kind of stopped and he said, "Hold on a second. You can't take anything to heaven with you." And my sisters were prepared for that. I said, "Yeah, Dad, that's what we're going to give it to you now, so you have time to memorize it." And it's just a wonderful moment. But that's kind of the parents I grew up with. My dad was really a revert. His father abandoned them when he was 4 or 5. And his father, my grandfather, he had a huge conversion at the end of his life. But so my dad became kind of like his father, a wealthy playboy, basically. But then he had a big conversion through Opus Dei, came back to the faith, and he really came back strong. He ended up becoming a member of Opus Dei, and so both my parents were in Opus Dei. So I grew up with that, with great parents who loved God, who went to daily mass, they were great lovers of freedom. They never pushed anything on us. But the example they gave us, well, I'll give you, one thing that, I say this now with shame, but we were a big athletic family. My dad was an incredible athlete, so we did a lot of sports together. And during the winter, the big one was skiing. So just about most weekends we would go skiing. And my dad would always this was Saturday we would go skiing. And my dad would always make the same announcement Friday at dinner. He said, "Okay, kids, the plan tomorrow is Mom and I are going to go to Mass. So we can all go to Mass if you want to. And then breakfast, we get, a nice breakfast and we go skiing. What do you guys think?" Yeah. I don't think any of us ever went to Mass with them. It's Saturday morning. You had to get up early to go to, Saturday early morning Mass. So... And my dad never said, "You rascals, you're not." He would always offer it, but they did it. And we watched our parents go to daily mass, even on Saturday morning. He had to get up early, and my dad worked very hard. Mom stayed home, so work even harder, really. But yeah, now, that's the thing, that the example that they gave us at the time, maybe we didn't take advantage of it, but their witness actually had a huge impact, right? Because now most of us go to daily mass. And I say, hey, that's because of the witness and the example that we saw in our parents, right? So what was their influence? Huge. In fact, St. Josemaria, the founder of Opus Dei, used to say often to members of Opus Dei, including the priest, of course, that you owe your parents at least 90% of your vocation, if not more. And I remember... the day of my ordination or the day after, my parents met with the prelate of Opus Dei who ordained me a priest, Bishop Javier Echeverria, who was Saint Josemaria's personal secretary for many, many years. Then he ended up being the prelate of Opus Dei himself. But I remember it was a wonderful meeting. He was very warm, and he told my parents something that I thought was very funny. He said, "Hey, don't think, okay, now your son is a priest, now you're done. You can't, worry about the other ones because this one is ready." He says, "No, now you have to pray for him even more. Now, because you're the parents of a priest, now you have even more work, which is kind of, my parents were like, "Really?" Say, "Yeah, oh, yeah.
It's a big job.
And I'm convinced, and I think he told them also that, but I'm convinced that the mother, I don't know about the father, but the mother of a priest has heaven guaranteed. So
EveryLife.com is America's pro-life baby diaper and wipes company. And I'm so excited to share about their new products too. I love EveryLife.com, and I use EveryLife diapers and wipes for my little ones because these are a best-in-class product that are clean. There's no harmful dyes or fragrances or phthalates in this product. It is designed to be healthy for your little one and good for your little one's skin. If you go to EveryLife.com/join today, by joining the Changing Lives Club, you not only get 10% off your monthly diaper and wipe subscription, in addition to that, you'll get a free tote bag, and EveryLife.com will donate a box of diapers and wipes to a mother and baby in need. And I'm excited to share, EveryLife.com is now offering training pants for your little one. These are 12-hour leak-proof training pants, pull-ups for that little one that is maybe potty training. You got to check them out. EveryLife also has just come out with their new shampoo and baby wash and lotion package. The product is amazing. I have already started to use it. That's EveryLife.com/join. Use the code Lila.
So you said something a moment ago. You said your dad had a big conversion through Opus Dei. And if I heard you right, you said he was a wealthy playboy, I think were the words you used. That's so interesting that he had this, it sounds like he was living a different lifestyle. And then he had a conversion as an adult man. Mm-hmm. Were you being brought up by him during this time, or was this before he had
this
kids?
was before so the conversion happened. My guess, he was probably about 20.
So he wasn't married yet.
Yeah, okay. And my mother would have never married him in that kind of lifestyle. No, that happened probably 19, 20, 21. I don't remember, but around then. Yeah.
And how did that, I know people listening, some of them may have heard of Opus Dei. I've mentioned it a couple times because it was key in my conversion process of becoming Catholic, becoming closer to our Lord. Was it in college that your father encountered Opus Dei, or how did he encounter them?
Yeah, he must have been at the time, I would say probably a freshman in college, a sophomore, somewhere in there. Yeah. Maybe a senior in high school, but I don't think so. I think he would have been, I don't remember, to be honest, but somewhere around there, 20, 19. And the way it happened, is it's divine grace, God at work. Actually, it's, it all started, you see how my grandmother, his mother, and that's the reason they moved to Madrid, was because she came down with tuberculosis. And the closest and best hospital for this kind of care, and also the best French school in the same, from Tangiers, was Madrid. Madrid had a very good French school, because my dad, Tangiers, was French speaking. And also they had the sanatorium there, as they used to be called. So that's why they moved there. My grandmother with my dad and his brother. They had 2 kids. And what happened, unfortunately, sometimes she would have to go into this sanatorium for weeks at a time. And she would leave my father and brother by themselves in their apartment. And then, they did what at the time, and basically there's this totally wild parties. Well, my grandmother came back earlier than expected on a weekend, and she came, and there was one of those wild parties taking place, and she was shocked with what she saw. And so she was shocked, and my father, who really loved his mom, my grandmother, was so sorry to see her like that. And so they talked, and my grandmother said, why can't you just date good girls? Why are you doing this with these crazy people? And my father said, those are the only girls I know. I don't know anything else. Because he moved in bad circles. I mean, money. And so anyway, what happened shortly after that, again, it's all very providential. My grandmother was with 3 or 4 friends. They were having tea, and one of them asked her, hey, how are you boys? And said, well, not good. You know, I just witnessed this, and they felt bad for her. And one of them said, well, I have a nephew who's the most wonderful boy, and, you know, he's involved with a group where they organize very nice parties for boys and girls. It said, maybe your son. So what's the name of the group? And she said, oh, it's called Opus Dei. She didn't know anything about Opus Dei. She thought, I mean, Opus Dei doesn't do nice parties for boys and girls, but that's what she understood. And so he said, I'll tell my nephew to call your son. So this fellow who I grew up calling Uncle, Pepe, who became one of my dad's best friends, called my dad and said, hey, you want to come? And my dad understood he was going to a party. They were actually going to a recollection, this kind of adoration and prayer. They were, you know, the wires got crossed. My father thought he was going to a party. This guy thought he wanted to go to a recollection, to adoration and prayer. So when my father showed up, and it was a small chapel with the monstrance and all the things, and a priest, my dad freaked out. He said, where are the girls? Where am I? You know, said, shut up, because the thing was starting. So my dad sat through this thing. But amazing, when it ended, as the priest was coming out, he said, you, come, I need to talk to you. And after 2 or 3 hours with the priest, he went to confession, and bam, everything changed. So you can see it's one of those moments of grace, right? The way my dad, I mean, he told us the story a million times, you know, but he said, I don't know what happened, but it happened, you know? And so that's kind of, and my grandmother, whom I got to know some, I was about 6 or 7 when she died, but she was a very holy woman, very. You know, she suffered a lot. I mean, the husband abandoned. I mean, she was 24 when my grandfather left them, and with 2 little kids.
Completely abandoned to hook up with another woman, or just he didn't want to?
She left with a dancer in town. He'd left with the dancer, and my grandma was left. I think she got so sick because of the trauma of everything she went through. Amazingly enough, I mean, so I don't want to leave you and people with the... right before she died, and I remember this because we would never see my grandfather, and the little kids say, where is Grandpa? Well, you know, my dad didn't want to give too many explanations. But when my grandmother was dying, I remember my grandfather showing up, probably the first time I met him, or that I recall. And after that, every summer we would spend a few weeks with him. And it was not only until a little bit later that what happened was when my grandma was about to die, he asked my father, ask your father to come, I want to see him. So my grandfather came, to his credit, thinking that he was just going to get, you know, you, and he was going to get scolded for what he had done. That's what he thought. But instead, my grandma says, hey, I'm about to die. I want to tell you I still love you.
Wow.
You're still my husband. There was no divorce back then. And, you know, I'm hoping to get to heaven. I'll be praying for you and the family. But please, this woman you're with, marry her and baptize. They had a little girl. Baptize that girl, and I still love you. And then she died shortly after.
Wow.
My grandfather couldn't believe that there could be so much love after everything he had done to her. And that... he had an instant conversion, and he himself died a very holy death. You know, it's amazing. It's the power of grace, the power of love and forgiveness that is like, wow, you know. And it was great because then we got to enjoy being with Grandpa quite a bit, you know.
How old was she when she passed? She had lived a long life at this point.
Yeah, she was, my guess is that she was in the late 50s.
And so she died relatively young then. but she didn't remarry after being abandoned by her husband.
No,
at
because
24.
I mean, no, it's first of all, it was not, and she wouldn't have never. She always believed it's my husband, and I think she was always hoping to get him back. Never gave up on that, and in a way, she did. And so yeah, that was and then learning the whole story in detail was very. I mean, it always was to me, but I think all my siblings very inspiring. Right, the power of grace. The power of prayer. I mean, she never stopped praying for him, and the conversion came, when the conversion came, right?
Picture yourself living in a 14th century monastery that is the most gorgeous setting imaginable, and you're studying the good, the true, the beautiful in an epic summer. Yes, vacation effectively, but also place to stimulate your intellectual development and grow your mind. You've got to check out Franciscan University of Steubenville's amazing study abroad program in the beautiful Gömming, Austria. Here's a taste of the classes that are offered: prayers and poetry, the art and architecture of medieval cathedrals, sourdough bread making and virtue formation. Apparently, you get to bake sourdough bread every day and just eat it as part of your education. This sounds amazing. Marketing with a case study featuring an Austrian brewery, theology of the body, and more. And guess what? This is open to everyone. You don't actually have to be an enrolled student to do this amazing program. But if you are a student, this does count as course credit. This amazing trip will be happening this summer in mid-May to early June. Go to austria.franciscan.edu and sign up today. That's austria.franciscan.edu. Check it out.
There are so many conversions that I am hearing about, have heard about, to the Catholic faith, and to generally wanting to go the direction of Christianity. I think that's something that's happening a lot right now. And I do believe strongly that the work of San Josemaria, founding the work and what the Spirit inspired him to do, is a huge driver of it. And it's often kind of quiet and behind the scenes. I know Opus Dei isn't flashy, like out there being like, we're Opus Dei, line right up. It's a little more quiet and just peaceful behind the scenes working. You've been in ministry 20 years. I know you've seen conversions. Can you share some conversion stories that you've seen?
Yeah, I won't give names, but and that's one of the things that actually what you say is true, and I think it's amazing. It's very beautiful that sometimes we have a tendency to see more the dark side of things and all the bad. And there is plenty of bad, don't get me wrong. We fail sometimes to see, even in the midst of all of that, God is doing incredible things, as you say. Some of them are conversions. I mean, I have several in the works right now. People, even yesterday I had dinner with a young woman and the fiance. They just got engaged, and I'm doing their marriage prep. And she's a model. She has undergone kind of several steps in the conversion. One from being a model, let's say that you and I probably wouldn't want to see their pictures, to one where it's totally fine now to see her pictures, and which is very beautiful. But now the conversion to really taking her faith seriously. And so last night, in fact, I did a little marriage prep, and at the end, some preparation, because she wants to come into the Catholic Church. As she told me, now I don't want to wait because I'm hungering for the Eucharist, And that one took place because of their dating. I mean, I'm not a great fan of what I call missionary dating, but sometimes it works, which I think is great, right? But I'll tell you one that happened. I was doing these recollections in the evening, not too far from here. And this one for men, one for women. One day after this recollection adoration time, these two wonderful fellows came, and they say, hey, we need a favor from you. I said, what's up? He said, well, a common friend, a friend of the two of us, is dying, and he wants to be baptized. Would you do it? And I said, well, give me a little bit of background and what's going on. And basically, this fellow, his name is Doug, was a very successful money manager, investor, whatever, and he was investing their money. These were two pretty well-to-do professional men. And because the two of them met because this guy was investing both of their monies, and the three of them ended up becoming very good friends. It started as a professional relationship, became a friendship. And the interesting thing, these two guys are very strong Catholics. The money manager guy was a total convinced atheist. I mean, hardcore. And yet they became good friends, and they would have a lot of theological discussions. And well, one day this guy announced that he was quitting, that, get your money elsewhere. I have more money than I know for the rest of my life. And he told him that he was going to England. He was going to be at Oxford. He had been admitted in some program there doing theology and astrophysics and something else. But he wanted to become a disciple of Hawkins and Dawkins and all these people. And then come back to the States and become an apostle for atheism. That was his thing. And he did it. He was in England for 4 or 5 years, came back, had a beautiful home in Southern California. And basically, he would invite writers and Hollywood people and intellectuals and have this, that was his way of spreading atheism. But these two friends would sometimes be invited, and they were in the middle of all of this, and they were trying to bring some sanity and different point of view, and they stayed very strong. Well, shortly after his comeback, and when he was diagnosed with some rare disease of the nervous system that was very debilitating, and so very quickly he had to stop doing all of these things. Then he was confined to bed because he couldn't move, he couldn't walk anymore. And so these two guys would visit him every week, sometimes the two of them together, sometimes one or the other. And he would, the dog, the sick person, the atheist, would always ask him, hey, I'm having a tough time reading anymore. Would you read for me? And so part of the visit was they would read from some crazy book he was, whatever. And at one point, the two of them were talking and say, hey, why are we reading all this nonsense? We have a chance to read something good, different. So they decided that they would give him Mere Christianity. No, first was actually The Abolition of Man, Chesterton. I think that was the first one.
Good.
And they read that, and he asked, hey, what are you reading? Oh, we're not going to tell you, just listen. And he loved it. And then they read Mere Christianity, and he was really loving. And anyway, by the time they got to me, they were asking me to baptize him. They were halfway through the Catechism of the Catholic Church, which is amazing, because I know very few people who read the Catechism of the Catholic Church. So I went to see him. By then he was in a hospice, in a special hospital care facility. And I went to see him. He was in bed. He couldn't talk because the vocal cords now were affected by the nerve thing. So he could only kind of grunt. And I say, hey, doc, so do you know who I am? Yeah. He will, do you want to be baptized? And so I went through the basics. He said, to everything. And so we did the baptism and confirmation and Holy Communion. We did everything. And the anointing of the sick was. But what happened was, a few days before, I asked the two of them, ask his wife to make sure this is, because I didn't want his wife to think that they were taking advantage of him because he was sick or whatever. And they came back and they thought, oh, she's totally in favor, good. The day or 2 days before, I got a phone call from Doug's wife asking me if she could come to the baptism and everything there in his room in this care facility. So of course, the wife, he would be so happy that, but remember, I'm not a Christian. She was non-baptized. A woman who, from Northern Oregon, a lot of weird people out there. You hug trees and you have pet rocks and that kind of wonderful. But she came, and when I got to the place, I was parking the car, she came running, hey, I brought something for the ceremony. And I was a little nervous. Oh no. I said, what did you bring? I said, it was a Christian symbol. I went to the store and I asked for a Christian symbol. So I bought this and I was terrified. What is? And she unwrapped the thing. It was a cross. And I said, yeah, that's a Christian symbol. Yes, it is. Very good. So I asked her to hold the cross during the ceremony, and she was in tears holding the cross. It was, but here's the point. At the end, when we finished and we had a little fun champagne and we, to celebrate, I was going back to the car and she followed me. It was wow, I'll never forget. She said, "Hey, I just want to tell you something." I said, "Yeah." She says, when we started doing all our things in our home and all these people, we had 1 million friends, a lot of things. And when Dad got sick, pretty quickly, everything stopped. And then the only 2 people who almost every week for the last 3 years who've been coming are 2 Catholics. She said, if this is what Catholics do, if this is what the Catholic Church does to people, I want to become a Catholic too. I was in tears. I said, wow. And it's Christians. It's not just Catholics, huh? But Jesus said it at the Last Supper. Love one another. The new commandments, love one another as I love you. By this, all will know that you're my disciples. All we have to do is to love as Jesus does. And we'll bring about the conversion of the whole world. That's all we need to do. One person at a time. That's what these 2 friends did. And that's what I'm seeing, a lot of those conversions. Because people experience that love. And then they want it. And when they see, well, this is coming from Christ. And then bam, here they come, Anyway, that's one. I could give you more examples. But to be honest, I feel so grateful, privileged, small, that I'm seeing all these miracles, and you go, wow, it's so, and there's so many of them. Yeah.
7 Weeks Coffee is America's pro-life coffee company on a mission to fund the pro-life movement, one delicious cup of coffee at a time. And they check every box. This is pesticide-free, mold-free, organically farmed, low-acid coffee that is absolutely delicious. Why is it called 7 Weeks Coffee? Because at 7 weeks, the baby is the size of a coffee bean. That's why 7 Weeks Coffee donates 10% of every single sale, including the sale you can make today, to pro-life pregnancy centers. In fact, 7 Weeks Coffee has donated almost $1 million now, over $750,000 to pregnancy centers because of passionate coffee lovers like yourself. And because coffee always tastes better with a free gift, if you go to 7weekscoffee.com today and subscribe using the code Lila at checkout, you'll get a free 2-pack of their new travel bags to take your coffee wherever life takes you. And exclusively for the listeners of this show, you can go to 7weekscoffee.com. You can use the code Lila at checkout to get up to 25% off your first purchase, as well as your free gift. Go to 7weekscoffee.com and don't forget to use that code Lila at checkout for up to 25% off your order when you subscribe.
What is Opus Dei, and why is it different from just being a regular Catholic? And why do you think so many of these conversions are happening? I do think Opus Dei is a unique conversion machine within the church.
Yeah, I would say, I don't think we're the only one. And there's other wonderful, I don't want to start naming, all the different, I have a number of close friends who are Dominicans, and I see what they're doing, and it's like, wow, the Norbertines in Orange County. Anyway, I'm very close to the Carmelites in LA, anyway, so, but we're one more. But what I would say, maybe what makes Opus Dei unique is that it came very specifically for lay people. And bringing not a religious spirituality that can be applied to lay people, but a true lay spirituality, which is something Opus Dei starts. It wasn't an idea that Saint Josemaria was there, well, I want to do something, or I see a need in the church, and maybe this would be a good thing that I could do. It was miraculous. One day, he was a young priest. He was 26 years old. He was making a retreat. And
in Spain,
in Madrid. And the way he put it himself is, it was a vision. It's something that he didn't want to talk much about it. He tried to keep it as quiet as he could, but that God showed him, this is what I need. This is what I want you to do. And so that's what he did. In fact, he felt so much that the name Opus Dei is interesting where it comes from. He didn't want to give it a name because he just called it this thing that God showed me. But when he went to the bishop to tell the bishop what was happening. The bishop was very supportive, and Saint Josemaria started working. And at one point, the bishop wanted to give it a canonical approval, an approval within the church. But he needed a name. He said, well, what are you calling this thing? And it says, God didn't say anything. And that vision, he didn't give it a name. So I can't give it a name. And the bishop said, well, you need a name. He says, well, God didn't give me one. So we'll come up with one. And so he didn't want this to be called after his name or after. He was pretty torn. And shortly after, when he went to see his spiritual director, who was actually a Jesuit in Madrid, the spiritual director, as he was coming in, he said, hey, Josemaria, how's that work of God going? And I said, well, work of God. And then work of God, Opus Dei. So he decided to give it a Latin name because he didn't want Opus Dei to be associated with a particular country or language. He said, God clearly said, this is for the whole world, for the whole church. So he went back to the bishop and said, it's Opus Dei. It's the work of God. He said, I didn't come up with a name. It kind of, God in a way gave him the name through the spiritual director, So, and it's very much that, to answer your question, is helping busy men, women, how to find God and love God with all their heart and mind and soul and strength, and develop a deep prayer life in the midst of their busy life, their work, their family, their friends, their civic responsibilities. How can you find God in everything that you do, including your sleep, he would say. And that's what Opus Dei does, helping people find God and develop a deep relationship with him in the midst of a normal, ordinary life that most people live, right? So, and to do it quietly. Saint Josemaria used to say, is to do and to disappear. Do, and if nobody even knows that you're doing even better, that's why sometimes we're accused of being secretive. And it's not that we're secretive, it's that we don't want to be seen because we want people to see God, not us. So if Opus Dei if we're doing our work, you're going to see a lot of people doing wonderful things. With Opus Dei backing them up, giving them all the spiritual resources, all the spiritual direction and everything. And they are the ones who are being seen, and we're not. Even being here with you and talking about this, I'm almost breaking the rules, so to speak, right?
Thank you.
No, but it's good. I'm super happy. Obviously, I love Opus Dei. It's my life. And as you say, some people misunderstand, and it's good to try to explain it better or clear some of the misunderstandings, like we're secretive. We're not. We don't advertise. It's not because we want to be secret. It's because we want people to see Christ, not us, We want other people who are doing wonderful things to be seen, So hopefully we're mobilizing a lot of people to do great things for the church and the world. And nobody knows that Opus Dei is kind of pushing them, up, and that's it, because that's what God wants.
Well, I think the structure is so much action, not talk. Do the retreats, do the meditations, do the recollections, do the spiritual direction, do the confessions, do the sacraments, do the faith formation, and soul to soul. So much of it is soul to soul, and that's where the richness can happen, because this is a relationship that is being developed between people of God to draw closer to God, and then invite friends in. Yeah. Keep inviting people in to get closer to God is the end game. I know obviously, but Dan Brown, the author, I'm not super familiar with him, but I know he wrote a book with a character in it about generally speaking, Opus Dei making it out to be secretive and shady, and they do all these self-punishments and all of this. And this was, I think now, how long ago was it? 15 years ago?
It's in the 2000s, early 2000s, somewhere in there.
But I do think there was a bit of an impact there of like, well, it sounds Opus Dei. It's a spooky name. It's, it's Latin. What would you say would be you mentioned secretive, people saying, is it so secretive? It's obviously just doing the work. It's not about being secretive. It's about doing the work. But what would you say would be that you've experienced maybe the most common misconceptions about Opus Dei? And what would you say is really the truth about what it really is and what it's all about?
Yeah, I mean, I just gave you the essence of what it is, but the misconceptions, and there is nothing new in the church. I mean, for many, many years in books and novels and books, the Jesuits were always the evil if you wanted to attack the church, right?
They still get a lot of hate.
And Jesuits. I guess now we're part of that group too, Mm-hmm. I think it's probably also because they feel threatened in a way that we're going against their agenda in some way, right? Dan Brown's book, it was crazy to me, the worst thing is the, really in a way, the blasphemous thing that Jesus had, a baby with Mary Magdalene, and the whole history of the Catholic Church, the Church and the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. Is been trying to suppress that truth and killing the people along the way. So the truth, the whole thing is crazy. It's nuts. That's the worst part of the book, that they take advantage of, or they use Opus Dei as the super evil now people who were the assassins. So the main character is an Opus Dei monk, which first of all, we don't have monks because we're lay people, and it's an albino monk. It's all part of the, throw everything in there to make it look as sinister as you can make it. But, that novel was incredibly successful. And then the movie, with Tom Hanks and all of that. And during those years, I remember it being on flights and this, and people next to me reading the book. And to me, became actually a great opportunity because I say, how do you like the book? Oh, it's great. And I would ask, have you ever met anybody in Opus Dei? No. Hi, and I would introduce myself, and then led to really wonderful conversations, and but I think the biggest misconceptions, one of them is the secretive, the other one is the powerful, how powerful we are, which I don't know. Powerful within the church. It's interesting, if you go by power, for example, how many bishops, archbishops, or cardinals are in Opus Dei? It's very, very, almost none. And compared to, Franciscans, Dominicans, Carmelites, whatever order you want to, put out there, Salesians, compared to them, we're nothing. So if you want to say power within the church, I think some of it starts because in Spain, where Opus Dei starts and where it grows, and we're still the largest, after the Spanish Civil War, where Spain needed to be rebuilt and was a mess, it just happened that some of the best prepared, smartest, whatever people were members of Opus Dei. And young, and Franco picked some of them to be in his cabinet. So they were part of Franco's government. And so I think a lot begins there. Okay, here we go. Opus Dei is powerful for these people. What people don't tell you is that there were just as many members of Opus Dei who were very opposed to Franco, who were exiled from Spain because, and so they
were brothers. And that's so interesting that there were brothers and sisters in the work who were on opposite political sides. And some of them working directly with the government, and some of them literally exiled by the same government. Did they talk?
There's no problem. And this is one of the things that Saint Josemaria always, that when it comes, the only things that we agree in Opus Dei is our love for Jesus Christ and the teachings of the church. Everything else, you can think whatever you want. There is no, and so in fact, he would recommend, for example, in the centers of Opus Dei, obviously they're normal people, but let's not get into political things because that's not who, you vote, you think whatever you want. There's absolute total freedom. And he would emphasize that. In fact, he was almost pressured at some point to say, even this has not been written, and maybe I'm being indiscreet, and I cannot give you the exact source, but they put pressure on him to talk to some of those members of Opus Dei for certain things. And he said, I'm not doing that. I'm their spiritual father. Whatever they want to do politically, economically is their business. I'm not getting involved with that. I just want to make sure that they're becoming saints in and through their work. Whether working, I'm not getting involved, and I'm not gonna tell them what to do. The Secretary of State and others were trying, hey, take advantage of this to steer in some way. He said, I'm not gonna do that. And he made some enemies in Rome for refusing to do that. He believed in the absolute political freedom and whatever of the members of Opus Dei to think whatever way they wanted. But I think part of the power and the thing comes from that. And what people don't talk about is even, they always say, Opus Dei started under Franco and with Franco's support. That's not true. Franco picked these people because they were the most qualified. Had nothing to do with their being, and if anything, Saint Josemaria and Franco didn't get along because Saint Josemaria never, ever, it was very vocal about not liking dictators. And when clearly Franco was becoming a dictator, Saint Josemaria made his opinion known very clear, that he thought this should be, I don't know if he used the word democracy, but freedom and get people, and Franco, didn't quite get it. And so the two of them exchanged words a number of times. So it's kind of interesting, and it makes sense to me. He was such a lover of freedom that, this wasn't, and yet he let his spiritual children, hey, if they wanted to work for Franco, that's their, I'm not going to tell them not to. They can make their own decisions, And so the power, the secrecy. I mean, the other thing, the misconception is how wealthy Opus Dei is. And it's funny because I have a few Jesuit friends, and even just in California. I mean, I think just the Jesuits in California are wealthier than Opus Dei in the entire world in terms of assets and this. I mean, I don't know. I'm throwing that thing. Maybe I'm wrong, right? But it's true that we have quite a few institutions. And John Allen, in his book on Opus Dei, gets into all of this. And it's, by the way, it's a wonderful book. If you want to get into the nuts and bolts of Opus Dei, read John Allen's book. It's wonderful. And actually, when it comes down to it, I mean, we don't have that much money or anything, and which I'm happy about, because we shouldn't. Because living poverty according to the spirit of Opus Dei is so liberating, because it appears that you have, when you don't, you just have the things that you need and nothing else, and you take very good care of them so they last, so you don't have to buy new ones, and just have the things that you need to do the work of God. That's it, and it's very liberating. I don't know if I answer your question,
No,
but
it's simple, right? Some of these answers that you're giving, but I think it's easy for things to get all hyped up, and in the mysteriousness, people can have all kinds of, an imagination about what things can mean. What does it mean practically to be a member of Opus Dei? What does that look like?
Well, on the externals, you're not going to see much of a difference, right? But what you're to be a member of Opus Dei, you have to be called by God. So you need a vocation. God has to call you. And that is discerned in prayer like any other vocation. Like you discern marriage, or you discern the religious life or the priesthood. Within that, you can discern your vocation to Opus Dei if God is calling you to it. Usually the way it happens is you're introduced to Opus Dei by a friend, a family member, a classmate, a colleague, and you begin to maybe attend, you go to a retreat, or you go to a recollection or something, and then you begin to read. Maybe you read some of the writings of Saint Josemaria, and this begins to resonate with you. And at some point it comes, okay, yeah, maybe I'm being called to a spiritual direction, of course. But in terms of the actual practices of Opus Dei, they are the traditional practices of the church. What Saint Josemaria had a genius. He was super practical. And one of the things he saw clearly is, if you're a busy mom, a home with kids, or working mom, or a dad with a demanding job and traveling, whatever your situation is, and usually is busy, how can you develop a deep life of prayer and formation in the middle of that? So it's going to require discipline and order. And so he came up with this idea. He called it a plan of life, which is basically a daily prayer routine, a weekly prayer routine or formation that is very flexible and yet demanding, so that anybody can live it to some degree or another. And that includes like a morning offering, and then daily mass, and spend time in adoration, mental prayer, and then pray the rosary, do some spiritual reading, some reading on the gospel, and examination of conscience at night, which at first is, wow, that's a lot. But when you begin slowly and little by little, you incorporate it into your life. As he says, it fits like a hand in a glove. You just little by little, that's the way I did it. I started doing a little thing and a little rosary, and then a little more, and it just it's like breathing. It becomes part of you. You don't have to think about it, you know. So that's what a member of Opus Dei does on a daily, weekly basis. Getting, you know, there is a lot of formation that is given so you can carry out the work of evangelization and apostolate in the church. You can't give what you don't have. So there's weekly meetings and monthly meetings to kind of be formed and be filled, so that then you can give it and share that with others. So that would be your typical Opus Dei member. Those are the things. But what you're going to find is hopefully somebody who clearly loves God, who loves Jesus Christ, who loves the Eucharist, and then somebody who loves family and friends. I mean, hopefully what you're going to see is very loving people who are trying to share the love of Christ that they have with everybody in that context of normal life, you know, family, friends, work, you know, loving your colleagues, the people who work with you, you know. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did. That habit of prayer, the plan of life. What is your, let's say you're talking to someone and they've tried to pray, they pray, you know, they say, well, I pray throughout the day. Maybe they read their Bible, but they don't know how to kind of go to the next level, or if they even should be trying to go to a next level. They want to live by the Spirit in their day to day, but it's tough. And then maybe also there's dryness in the prayer. I think that can always be a big discourager for some people, where they're maybe have received some inspirations in their faith walk, and then it's getting harder. It's really hard to concentrate. It's really hard to make the time to sit down. And then when they make the time to sit down, they're distracted. You know, they're not really feeling like they're getting something from the prayer, but they want to still, serve God, live the life of faith. What's your guidance? You're such a good guide on prayer. I know that's where you spend so much of your time, besides the sacraments, doing, is guiding people to pray.
Yeah, great question, Lila. Let's see, there's so many things coming to my head all at once. If I can do it in a way that is a little bit organized and helpful here. I mean, the first thing that I would say is kind of a preamble to prayer, which is, on the one hand, realizing how much God loves us, and that we're infinitely loved and unconditionally. I mean, every time you look at a crucifix, what you're seeing there is basically God, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, saying, this is how much I love you. Which to me, I just don't get used to it, Thank God I don't. I mean, so that's, and at the same time realizing that God made us for himself. We were made to be with him. That's the way we're wired. So if we don't have a strong relationship with God, we cannot be really fulfilled and happy. There's something missing. And I think that's everybody, even people who don't pray, there is a hole in them. They know something is missing. They don't know what it is. It's like the old country song, looking for love in all the wrong places. You look for in this, and then people usually, they turn to it in pleasure, in power, in fame, and all of these things, and they don't find it. Because we were made for God. This is St. Augustine, Lord, you made us for yourself, and our heart are restless until they rest in you, So that's And then I would say realizing that because of original sin and all the distractions and all the things, sometimes it takes us a while to realize, how much we're loved, what God does for us. We don't quite identify the whole, the vacuum that's what it is. And that's what we need other people to help us. And God always sends the people to tell us, to help us see that that's what is missing. This is where friendship and family come in. And there is so much noise and distraction in our lives that it makes it very difficult, because to listen, to hear God's voice, God is so loving, but he's so gentle, and so he whispers, he doesn't shout. Occasionally he does. I think the recent fires, a lot of people, but somebody just today or yesterday asked me, why the fires? And I think sometimes it's not that God caused the fires, but he certainly allowed them to happen, because he could have stopped them. He's God. But I think it's to get our attention. I think occasionally he says, hey, I'm here. And I've seen already some people kind of turning and realizing, well, maybe God is trying to say something to me, But normally he's gentle and he whispers, but if we're so full of noise and distractions, and now technology, we have screen in front of us all the time, and we have our earbuds on. And that's why I think people find it more and more difficult to pray. It becomes very difficult because we're so full of noise. So I think what we need, and the world desperately needs, is to make times for silence, and to exercise that being in silence. The way I try to help people, I tell them, hey, somehow at the beginning when they say, I would like to pray, I say, 5 minutes a day, go to a place in silence for 5 minutes and just talk to Jesus. Just talk to him for 5 minutes. Just go, nothing, no podcasts on prayer, none. And just talk to Jesus for 5 minutes. And if you don't know what to say, just keep saying, Jesus, I'm here. Jesus, I'm here. Jesus, I love you, for 5 minutes. That's it. That's the beginning of our revolution. If everybody did that, we would change the world. It's amazing, right?
Wow.
And begin the habit of prayer. That's the way, I learned it from my parents, right? But I think if all parents were to begin to teach their children slowly and to put more silence in their lives, then one thing that I try to help people also do, and I think is very important, is realize that, this is kind of how it goes. I say, hey, do you pray? And they say, oh yeah, Father, I pray. And I said, when you pray, who do you talk to? And they always say, they're surprised by the question, and they say, God. And I said, really? So what do you mean? Yeah, when you pray, you talk to God. Yeah. To God who? And they're confused. And I tell them, hey, God is 3 persons. We can only relate to persons, person to person. Just like if I tell you, hey, do you love your family? You say, of course I do. But that's not technically correct. You love your father, you love your mother, you love your sister, you love your brother, you love your son, your daughter. And with each one of them, you have a personal, unique relationship. I don't love my father the same way I love my mother. I don't treat my mother the same way I do my sisters. My mother would kill me. But with God, it's the same. We have to learn little by little, and this is important. Hey, God the Father, and God the Father is the Father. And you look at how Jesus talks to God the Father. He calls him Abba, which is Dad. That's the way and Jesus, if you see in the New Testament, the examples of how Jesus always begins prayer by thanking his Father, always thanks him, and then asks or says. And Jesus is teaching us how to pray. And so that's the Father. And then our relationship with Jesus is not the same as with Jesus is not the Father, he's the Son. And so in a way, you can say he's our brother. So with Jesus, we have to treat him like a brother and a friend. And he said, I call you friends. Jesus clearly wants to have with each one of us a relationship of friendship. I mean, it's a brother who's a great friend. And the Holy Spirit, I think, is the most difficult one. It's easier to, if you've had a very loving father, it's much easier to relate to God the Father. Those who haven't had that, they find more difficult. I think with Jesus is the easiest because he became one of us and we read about him. We see movies, the Passion, the Chosen, whatever, right? The Holy Spirit is the most difficult one, I think. Because the two images that we have scripturally for the Holy Spirit is a dove at the baptism. And it's tough to have a personal relationship. A dove is basically a white pigeon, right? And the other one is the tongues of fire at Pentecost. So, but I think there, what is helpful, it's very, very helpful to me, is the way Jesus refers to him. He calls them parakletos in Greek, right? Is the counselor, the teacher, the mentor.
The coach.
The coach, and that, I think all we can relate. I don't know, bro. All of us have an experience of just a great teacher, a mentor, a coach, and that's who he is. And we have to relate to him that way. And so part of our growing in close and in intimacy with God is, how do I relate and when to the Father? So sometimes our prayers, and in the liturgy, we do separate. Sometimes we pray to the Father, sometimes to the Son, sometimes to the Holy Spirit. And many times we put the three of them together, like in the prayer, glory be to the Father. But I think we have to develop that. And then I would say, to kind of answer your question, go from like the prayers that we learned when we were little, which we call them vocal prayers, morning offering or a night prayer, the guardian angel prayer, or the St. Michael prayer, it's a great way to get children to start to pray, repeating the Hail Mary, then the Our Father, and then little by little go to prayer that is more meditative. I think a great transition is a rosary. The rosary is a great transition because it's both vocal prayer, we're saying the Our Father, the Hail Mary, and the Glory. But what you're doing is while you're saying those prayers, the prayer that Jesus taught us, then the Hail Mary, which is mostly scripture, and then the Glory Be. But while you're praying those prayers, the way the rosary is structured is you go through the life of Jesus, and mostly the life of Jesus with Mary, but it's all of them. And so in a way, the rosary is praying vocal prayers in a meditative way as you're considering and reflecting on the different events of the life, like the joyful mysteries. We reflect on the Annunciation, and then Mary's visitation to Elizabeth, and then the birth of Jesus, and then the presentation in the temple, and then the finding of Jesus in the temple, and you're meditating on the life of Christ. Is basically, I had this conversation, actually, it was at the live action gala, after the thing and, the post-gala party. I was there with 2 or 3 evangelical pastors who were there, young, fun. We had a great time together. And one of them asked about Mary. Hey, what about Mary? And what about the rosary? And so I was explaining this to him, and I could tell he had never heard this. It's something that all Catholics know, right? And when I told him, listen, the rosary is a very, very profoundly Christological. It's all about Christ. But it's basically Mary telling you her recollections of the life of Jesus. And Mary's whole ethos, her whole life is all about Jesus, and is bringing everybody to Jesus. So when I told him, listen, this thing that you have with Mary is the opposite. There is no more, in a way, I would say Mary is the most Protestant person there is, because it's all about Christ, right? And anyway, but then from there you go to more contemplative prayer, which is that prayer that is more, is the prayer of the heart, is the prayer of the mind, where you just enter into that beautiful dialogue with Jesus from the heart and the mind without the need for, sometimes there is that step called Lectio Divina, which a lot of people use, which is basically you take a passage from the gospel, maybe you take a word or a phrase, and you just let it sink in. And you go from lectio, reading, to meditatio, to meditating on it, to contemplatio, to contemplating. It's a beautiful, and it's a great tool for people who want to develop more of there's the Ignatian way of prayer, which I think is beautiful and is very useful. In this case, you take a passage and then you read it, and then you just use your imagination. You put yourself in to say, Jesus is on the boat in the storm. And then you close your eyes and you try to see yourself in the boat with Jesus. And then there's the storm, and then Jesus calms the storm. Or when Jesus is walking in the water and tells Peter, come out of the boat, and Peter begins to walk on. And and that's another very beautiful way of entering into a more contemplative prayer. But in the end, the goal, and this is what Opus Dei tries to do, is that your whole day is a prayer. That while you're working your work, you're turning it into prayer by the love you put into it, by the fact that you're doing it to love God and to love others. And you can do it in a very contemplative, seeing Jesus next to you as you do your work. I always say a lot of moms who stay home choose to stay home with their children. And typical, and I talk to hundreds of moms a week. I mean, it's very challenging. Sometimes they're just pulling their hair out because the kids and this and that, and they can, one of the most typical things they confess is impatience and yelling, and which I think is very charming. But I always tell them, hey,
I feel like that's at the top of my list for every confession I go to with you is like, I was impatient 5 times or whatever it is.
I always tell them, hey, your problem is not impatience, although you may be impatient. Mm-hmm. Your problem is that you forget that God is there with you. If you were more prayerful, if you were more aware, and I always tell them, hey, imagine that Jesus or Mary, often with moms I say Mary, imagine that Mary says, hey, can I stay with you for a couple of weeks? I'll help you with things. And Mary's living with you in the house.
Wow.
Do you think you would be yelling at your kids? And they always say, no. Well, she's there.
Just hand Mary the baby.
But she's there. Mm-hmm. Jesus is there with you. You forget. But that's why, and the same at work. You think you're going to yell at your employee or you're going to be upset with. Jesus is there with you. And this is one of the reasons why, when you think about why would God decide to enter into the world that he created by the incarnation, becoming a little baby and be born like all of us are, and then, go through, adolescence and this, and then get a job. And I mean that 30 out of his 33 years, Jesus did what all of us do. It was a totally normal life. Why? Why didn't he just appear as a 30-year-old and really get to the business? I think God is telling us something that is so profound and important. What he's saying is, all that you do can be divine. I did it. I came to redeem everything. Your family and your work is something that is truly divine and can be turned into a prayer the same way I did. That's kind of, and that's in a way is the core teaching of Opus Dei and San Josemaria, is that everything that we do can be turned into prayer, can be divine. It depends on the love that you put into it and how well you do it and the reason why you do it, which is out of love for God and out of love for family and friends. You cannot do that if you don't have those times devoted just to be with God. You'll remember that Jesus is with you. You'll be able to do your work the same way Jesus worked if you have times that you devote just for God, for prayer. That's the genius of the plan of life. It teaches you, allows you to develop these moments with God. So then everything that you do is prayer. So you don't have, like most people do, Sunday is a day for God, And then the rest of the week, you do the rest of the stuff, as if they were totally separate things. It's crazy. It's everything is God, and everything is an opportunity to love him. So everything can be turned into prayer. I think it's beautiful. I think it just changes the way so there's nothing that is boring or tedious, everything is, hey, I'm loving God by cleaning the toilet. I'm loving God by, giving the kids a bath. I'm loving God by doing the dishes or whatever people do,
What do you say to especially the mom who is, maybe it's dealing with sleepless nights or sick kids or, lots of pent up energy. It's raining a lot. They're not going outside. It's very difficult to carve out that time. It can feel very difficult to carve out that time to even make it to Mass or to, have a moment of silence, a moment to oneself. I can hardly shower by myself. How can I have a moment to pray by myself? How would you? And then there's also this sense of, I'm missing out on my prayer. I need to pray. I want to get closer to God, but look, I'm so far and I'm getting impatient. And you've heard this a million times from moms. What do you say? What would you say to them?
Well, at first I would give them hope and say, hey, I know to you it feels that way right now, but it can be done because there's plenty of moms who do that. My mom did it with 9 kids and she's no Wonder Woman. She's normal. But the first is that it can be done. You cannot do that overnight, but just start little by little. Have those 5 minutes with Jesus. Doing a morning offering, it takes 20 seconds. Praying 3 Hail Marys at night before you go to bed takes 30 seconds. And then doing a little bit time of reading of the scriptures. Okay, do 5 minutes. Try it, you'll find it. There will be a moment. It's just the trying. And the thing, ultimately, all of those things, the goal is not to do all this stuff. The goal is to love God with all your heart. These are means. They're not the end. I wanna love God with all my heart. And the love is in the trying. It's when you try, when you keep trying, because you want to give God that time. You want to give it to him. It can be done. Just start little by little and then talk to other women who do it. It's funny, even with young women, this happens all the time, okay? I try to get them to, hey, go to daily Mass. Oh, I can't, I don't have any time. So yeah, you're not married, you don't have kids, come on. No, but I'm so busy. Or I try to tell them to do some contemplative mental prayers. Say, come on, 5-10 minutes with Jesus, come on, it's so hard. And then, all of a sudden, they meet somebody. And then they come next time. They come, oh, I met somebody. Father, look, he's great. And so really, yeah, we're spending all this time together. And then I go, oh, wow. And I tell them, hey, I thought you didn't have any time. And they always say, well, but this is different. I say, okay, that's it. Why is different? You have time for this boy, but you don't have time for Jesus? What's going on? You have time for the things or the people that you really, really think they're important. And it's not my kids or Christ. It's both. And in fact, taking care of your kids is taking care of Jesus too.
This is why we love you, Father Luke. It's like the secret assassin. That it's like the gentle, nice Father Luke. And then it's like, you have time for the guy. Why didn't you have time for Jesus?
But it's
in such a nice way. But it's the tough love because it's true. What you're saying is true.
Mm-hmm. So that's why I would say to those moms that you were asking, hey, it can be done. Start little by little, and try, make the effort. And it's not going to work every time. No. One of the things that I tell a lot of moms when take advantage when you're nursing, that could be your time for the scripture reading or your rosary, and take advantage of things. I remember, I learned to pray the rosary because on weekends when I was home, my mom very often would say, hey, who can help me fold laundry? And I love mom, and very often I volunteer. I love being with her. I was the one who spent a lot of time with her in the kitchen. I just love being with my mom. And so my mom would say, okay, while we fold, we're going to pray the rosary. And it was great. We were folding, and Holy Mary, Mother of God, Our Father, And because my mom realized this is the only time I'm going to be able to do it today. On the Saturdays were crazy because we were all there and da-da-da.
How old would you be folding with her and praying the rosary?
I don't know. I was 5, 6, 7, and we did it a lot. And definitely every time we were in the car, always would offer. Hey, who wants to pray the rosary? It was a mandatory. Hey, if you don't want to pray, that's okay. Just be quiet. It was always that big emphasis on freedom. But my parents would, or my mom would, if she was alone in the car, because we realized, hey, this is going to be my best moment to pray the rosary. Or sometimes my dad, when we were traveling, his meditative prayer, mental prayer, he would always say, hey, kids, Dad is going to pray. If you don't mind, be quiet. And can somebody read for me? And we would get the New Testament or a copy of St. Josemaria the Way, has these little pithy points that you can use for prayer to help you. And he would ask for a volunteer because he was driving. And so we would read. And that's how I learned to do meditative prayer, because I would, or one of my siblings would read for Dad, and we were quiet. We wanted to be respectful, at first, but we got used to the silence. And so we kind of grew with it because our parents were doing it, And I think this is one of the things that parents and the moms that you were asking realize. First of all, you cannot give what you don't have. If you want your children to love God, to love Jesus, you have to love. And then realize that all of those things, that it's not just for you, but it's also for them. You're teaching them. Don't force them. But if they see you do it and you invite them, little kids love, they're going to pray, of course. Most of the time, not always. Sometimes they're in a bed, but you know better. Sometimes parents don't realize, wow, you could do a lot with your children. You could teach them a lot. Don't forget. And it's basically mostly your witness and your example. If they see you doing it, like, oh, okay, without forcing. I wouldn't force. It's a battle I have with some mothers more than fathers. No, they got it. I say, no, don't force them. Invite. Make it, but don't force. Say, I don't want to do the night prayers. Okay. You don't want to love God today. But God is going to be sad because you're not loving. And, Mary's going to be sad because they love you. But and then they'll come back. But they feel... what you want is that it comes from inside. It's not that you're forcing them.
What if they say, I don't want to go to Mass?
I would say the same thing.
Really?
Yeah.
What if it's your 5-year-old?
The 5-year-old is different, and that's silly, right? But when they start having more of a sense of thing, I would take advantage of that moment to engage them. Say, okay, why not? So they see that you're taking them seriously. Okay, why don't you want to go to Mass? I don't want to go to Mass because it's boring. Okay, that's an opportunity to explain, okay, why is it boring? Well, because the priest always says this. Okay, do we go to Mass just for the sermon? You think that? And then you get an opportunity. And then when you explain to them that the Mass is basically being there to be at Calvary, the Mass is bringing the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross to the present, so that the Mass is basically being with Jesus as he's dying for you. Why wouldn't you want, Jesus is dying for you so you can go to heaven. Don't you want to be there with him? And Jesus wants to come to you because he loves you. Don't you want to receive the Eucharist so Jesus can come into you and be close to your heart? And I think these are all opportunities to teach and to give them reasons based on love for them to go. And they still say, well, I still don't want to go. Okay. You have to play the long game. You cannot force somebody to love. They have to want it. I think most of the time when you explain, they'll go. I think it's later in the teenage years where they get more rebellious in a stronger way. And those are more tricky, the 16, 17, 18. And if they don't want to go to Mass, I wouldn't force them. I would try to give them good reasons. To me, the nuclear option for parents would be to say, okay, you don't have to. Can I ask you for a favor? Yeah. For the sake of your younger siblings, if they are younger siblings, because they don't understand, they don't have. If you refuse to go to Mass, it's going to confuse them. They're going to feel confused. Would you just for their sake and our sake as parents, Could you just go for that reason? And I've never seen it not work. Because again, in the end, you're given reasons of love. Not if you have to. I don't think that's helpful. I don't think parents should use that. You have to. You don't have to do anything. You have to want to. And for that, they need to understand the reasons. Why? Because it's got to be love. It's got to, and so that when they go to college, they'll continue to go. These parents who force and push, and then they're shocked when their kids go to college and they stop. Yeah, you force them the whole way. It wasn't coming from inside. They have to want it. And it's the most difficult task for parents is to inspire their children to want to love God, to inspire their children to want to be saints, to inspire their children to want to do great things for God because they want to, and they want to because they understand why this is worth it, you know? And the parents inspire them first by their witness and then teaching them, giving them good reasons, things to read, suggesting, you know, being surrounded by other families who are doing the same thing so that they'll have kids their age doing it too, you know, and that's very, you know, I'll tell you, it's just a beautiful thing. And now looking back, I'm a little embarrassed to tell you this, but I'm going to tell you. When I was a freshman in high school, some of my best friends, it was 5, 6 of us. We live in the same, most of us in the same street, same neighborhood. And we went on an Opus Dei retreat. My first retreat ever. It was a little gentle for, you know, we were 14 years old. And I remember after the retreat, the 5 of us talking, and we're still super close, 4 of us especially, but we decided that we were going to start going to daily mass. We're going to go to daily mass. And that was hard because the only daily mass we could go to because of the school, the bus route and all of that was 6:15 a.m. Oh, so, and the first day, 4 of us went and one of our friends didn't make it. And he was so down. And I remember after school, he was, oh, I betrayed you guys. And oh, Rafa, don't worry, you can do it. The next day he missed again. And he was so down.
Tired.
Well, and he felt really bad. And we were trying to be very encouraging. And so the third day he missed again, the Wednesday. And so I was talking to him, and then he came and said, listen, I need your help. Hey, Rafa, whatever, what do you need? Said, I cannot do it on my own. I just can't. So I thought of an idea, but you think, you're going to think I'm crazy, but I think it's going to work. I said, okay, what is it? I was very intrigued. He lived down the street from me in this kind of very fancy apartment building. And he said, well, in my room, he lived on a second floor, and his room kind of overlooked the swimming pool in the, and he says, when I go to bed, I'm going to tie a little string around my big toe. And I'm going to put it all the way down the window to you know. And so if you
This is before cell phones.
Yeah. I mean, this is way before. There was no internet. This is 1980, 81, whenever it was. I was a freshman. And you know, and you just come, you have to get up a little earlier to get me and just pull that string. So
he left the window open.
He left the window open.
The string hanging down the second story, and you're going to come down.
And I remember telling him, that, Rafa, that's insane. So, yeah, what if some lady comes to walk the dog early in the morning and sees the string? So I'm okay with that. And I went the next morning. I remember jumping this pretty sophisticated fence. I mean, I thought maybe it was electrocuted, you know, it was electric. But I went, and there was the string coming down from his window. So I pulled, and he came out. He said, wait for me. And so we got on our bikes, and we went to mass. And I did it the next day. And after that, he got going. All he needed was just that, do it a couple of times, right? But that happened because we were friends. And our families were, you know, and that support and thing was wonderful, you know. I mean, that's kind of, so I think this is one of the things that parents need to think about. Who are you, the school you send your children to? Who are these other families that you want them to, because their children and your children, if they become friends, they're going to help and support one another. I mean, look, a wonderful thing there was, we're great friends. He can ask me, hey, pull the string so we can go to daily mass, you know. I think back on it now, I think that was nuts, you know, but it was beautiful. And I would still talk and laugh about it, you know, many years later. And yeah, I don't know how we got into this, Lila, but.
That's a good, I mean, well, it reminding me of, we were talking about the moms having trouble praying, but you got to do it as a team.
Yeah.
Like being on a team where you're like, let's do daily mass. Did you do daily mass today? How are you doing with your daily mass? What are your struggles? Having someone help you out, like another person that is on the same, driving towards the same thing, it makes such a big difference.
Oh yeah, and that's why Jesus founded the church. He didn't give us a book and say, follow it. We need each other.
We need each other.
We were made to be with each other, and that's why you have family, and then you have extended family and friends. Because we cannot do this alone. We were not made to do it alone. That's why Jesus always sends 2 by 2s. He doesn't send one alone. So you lean on each other, and that's why we have the church, and that we have the parish, the communities, you know. Yeah.
This has been so rich and wonderful. I wanted to ask you, besides Holy Scripture, what would you say this is the book you just would recommend? If you had to just recommend one other book for spiritual reading, for getting deeper in the faith, for developing prayer.
You know, I don't think there is the one book, because it depends on your age, situation in life. But if I have to recommend one book just to pray and to learn to pray, I would recommend Saint Josemaria's The Way.
I was hoping you would recommend The Way,
because
or one of the.
It's very close to my heart. I learned to pray with it.
It's good.
Maybe that's the one I would recommend. I mean, the classics are the classics, right? And sometimes they are not so easy. I mean, St. John of the Cross, St. Teresa of Avila, or St. Ignatius, St. Francis de Sales. They're there. I mean, I'm a huge fan of St. Augustine's Confessions. I mean, that book made a huge difference to me, right? But one book, I mean, because it was so influential for me, maybe that's the one I would recommend.
And then, Father Luke, where can people find The Way? And are there resources online that you can point people to discover more deeply the formation activities of the work?
I would the Opus Dei webpage is great. It's very easy to navigate. It's got so much content. Yeah, that's what I would say. People, if you go there, you can find all the resources, all the things, not just about Opus Dei, but also the church in general. I mean, even you want to know what Pope Francis, or any Pope really, is saying. I mean, now Pope Francis, it's all in there. It's wonderful. It's just loaded with, including books and things that you can.
And free. You can read The Way for free.
Oh, yeah.
Right? What is that website?
It's called opusdei.org.
Easy.
Yeah.
Father Luke, thank you.
You're welcome,
We're so
Lila.
grateful
It's been
for
great
you.
being
You've
with
blessed
you.
and helped me and my family so much, and so many friends and so many people all over really the world. So thank you so much.
Thanks
this has
be
been
to
lovely.
God.
A huge thank you to our partner, EWTN. EWTN is the